Alright, so this week we're gonna be looking at system of equations. For today, we're gonna learn how to solve by graphing. So the first thing I have to do is look at each equation. The first two questions, I'm giving it to you what we call slope-intercept form. The y is by itself. So looking at question number 1, y is equal to -1. Now, when we only have one letter, we have the special cases. It's either horizontal line or vertical line. When we have the y equals -1, I want us to think of the x-axis. Another name that x-axis has is y equals 0. Notice I changed the letter. So when I have the line y equals -1, I know the x-axis is y equals 0. So y equals -1, it's the one below. That's my first line. Now when I look at the second line, I'm going to start with the 1. So on the y-axis, do you guys remember from Algebra 1, your teachers used to use the mx plus b, where the m, the number in front of the x, was your slope, and that told you how to move. Now, the number at the end, with the sign included, that was your intercept. In this case, your y-intercept. And that point, that's where you begin. Remember that from Algebra 1. So I'm going to begin at the y value of +1. So on the y-axis, I'm going to start at +1. My slope, I do need it as a fraction. If I don't have it as a fraction, make it a fraction. Now my 2/1, what it means is from the point that I'm starting with, I'm going to go up to, right, the number on the top, on my slope, the number at the top tells me up or down. Up if it's positive, down if it's negative. The number at the bottom tells me right or left. To the right if it's positive, to the left if it's negative. So this one says up to 1 to the right. So from the point where we started, I'm going to go up to 1 to the right. I can even do it again. Up to 1 to the right. So that gives me this line. Now, everything on the red line, every point on the red line makes the first statement true. Any point on the first line, on the red line, makes the first statement true. Any point on the blue line makes the second statement true. Now, what I'm asking here is which point, so I'm asking for a specific point, which point makes both statements true? In this case, is this one. My coordinates of that point are -1, -1. Remember, I have to write the x value first, then the y value. When you guys type it, make sure there's a little space after the comma. All right, let's take a look at question number 2. I'm going to use red for the first line. I'm going to start at the +1. Now, my negative sign, I must give it either to the top or to the bottom. Only to 1. I'm going to give it to the top. So now this thing says go down 1 and 2 to the right. I can do it again. Now let me create a line. Once again, any point on the red line makes the first statement true. Now let's take a look at the second one. I'm going to begin at -2. My slope says go up 1 and 4 to the right. I'm looking at my slope. Go up 1, 4 to the right. Now I'm going to make a line that goes through those 2 points. The point of intersection, the point where the 2 lines intersect, is the point 4, -1. once again, make sure after the comma, make sure you put in a space. All right, so this is when we have the graph given to us in slope-intercept form. And what I mean with slope-intercept form is the y by itself on the left. Now, what if we have it in standard form? Questions number 3 and 4. Right now, the x and the y are on the left side. Now, two things. One, I can move everything to the right side except the y, get the y by itself and write it in slope-intercept form, or we used to, or actually use the equation. I'm going to write 2x minus y equals negative 3, right? I'm looking at the first equation. And then I'm going to say, well, what if x is equal to 0? I'm going to use my intercepts. I'm going to say, well, what if x equals to 0? So I basically erase the x term, solve for y. Right? If x equals 0, I have that negative y equals negative 3. So I'm going to get that y is positive 3. Looking back at the equation, 2x minus y equals negative 3. Now I say, well, what if y equals to 0? So let me erase the y term. And I have that 2x equals negative 3. So that means that x, and I'm going to divide both sides by 2, x is equal to negative 3 over 2. If I can plot those 2 points, by all means do so. In this case, I have one point that's a little bit hard to graph. Let me give you guys a little formula here for the slope. I'm going to use m for the slope, and I'm going to write negative x over y. So the numbers that I have, the one I have in front of the x, I'm going to switch the sign, but the number that I have in front of the y, I'm going to leave it alone. So my my slope, let me use red again. My slope for this equation, I'm going to have negative 2 over negative 1. Once again, the number that was in front of the x, I switch the sign. So that's why I have a negative 2. The number that I have in front of the y, I leave it alone. So negative 1. All right, so I cannot graph that point, but I can do 0, 3. In this case, I see my slope, it says go down 2, 1 to the left. Now let me make a line that goes through my points. All right, let's take a look at the second equation. I have x minus 3y equals 6. First thing I say is, well, what if x is equal to 0? So I erase my x term. I have that negative 3y equals 6. So I get that y is equal to negative 2. And then I say, well, what if y is equal to 0? I erase my y term, and we can see that x is equal to 6. Now, unfortunately, one of my points I cannot graph. I cannot graph the point 6, 0. So let me get the slope. Remember I said negative x over y, so I'm going to use negative 1. I switch the sign on the number in front of the x over negative 3. So I can do the point 0, negative 2. Now my slope says go down 1 and 3 to the left. And I see that the point of intersection is the point negative 3. That's my x value. And then negative 3. That's my y value. All right, let's take a look at this last one. 3x minus 2y is equal to 8. I start saying, well, what if x equals 0? All I erase the x term, so I have that negative 2y equals 8. Let me divide both sides by negative 2. So I get that y is equal to negative 4. Then I say, well, what if y is equal to 0? I erase my y term. So I have 3x is equal to 8. Divide both sides by 3. So x equals 8 over 3. Now this point I cannot graph. So I will have to use my slope. I'm going to have negative 3 over negative 2. So I have the point 0, negative 4. Now this one says go down 3 and then 2 to the left. Unfortunately, I cannot go down 3. So when my slope takes me out of my graph, I'm going to switch the signs. Negative over negative, they can also become positives. So make sure you switch both signs. Now that one says go up 3, 2 to the right. All right. Any point on the red line makes the first statement true. Let's take a look at the second line. 3x plus 2y is equal to 4. I start by saying, well, what if x is equal to 0? Let me erase my x term. So I have the positive 2y is equal to 4. Let me divide both sides by 2. That gives me that y is equal to 2. I have the equation again. Now I say, well, what if y is equal to 0? I erase the y term. 3x equals 4. Let me divide each side by 3. So x is equal to 4 over 3. This second point I cannot graph. So I'm going to have to use my slope. Have negative 3 over 2. So I have the point 0, 2. My slope says go down 3, 2 to the right. The point of intersection is the point 2, negative 1. So I'm showing you guys how to do it in slope-intercept form, right, where the y is by itself. I'm showing you guys how to do it in standard form, where the x and the y are both on the left side. I'm looking in both cases, I'm looking for the point of intersection. Make sure after the comma, you guys do type in a space.